the mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
Hey, it's Kim Comando Today, your daily podcast to keep you up to date with all things digital and beyond. And I'd love to have you be a part of our podcast. You can make an appointment to speak with me. Just head over to Komando.com, and on the top right, there's a button that says Email Kim. Fill that out, and that's it. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, oh, if only I could get this idea to market, and then I could be the next billionaire. I would have this unicorn company. It would be amazing. And then you're like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. Okay. Well, so many of us have these ideas, but joining us today is Nathan Blecharczyk. He's the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Airbnb. Okay. We all know about Airbnb, but I don't know if you know how big Airbnb is. I mean, think about this. How many listings do you think are on Airbnb right now? How many? Make a guess. You're wrong. Okay. The right number is 7.7 million listings in 220 countries. And I admit, I've made a lot of money over the years from Airbnb. I sold the properties, but it was pretty amazing at that time. So Nathan, let's just start at the beginning. How the heck did you guys come up with this idea for Airbnb? I remember it had something to do with what? An air mattress in San Francisco. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Frankly, we were just trying to solve our own problem and pay the bills one weekend. You see, we were living together, the three of us. The three co-founders today were, before there was a company, just roommates living in San Francisco. And our rent was raised 25%.
Wow.
And I said, well, you know what? Actually, I'm moving out of here. That's too much for me. The other two guys wanted to remain, but they had just quit their jobs to become entrepreneurs, also known as unemployed.
Yeah, that's true.
So they didn't have any money either. But they noticed that a international design conference was coming to town, and they noticed that all the hotels were sold out for this event. And they had an idea. Why not rent out the vacant bedroom, the bedroom that I had vacated, to some designers who need a place to crash? Well, this room was empty. I had taken my bed with me. But Joe set up an air bed, and instead of calling it a bed and breakfast, they called it an air bed and breakfast. So Airbnb is short for air bed and breakfast. And they blew up an air bed, and they put up a simple blog post, and they ended up hosting three designers from different parts of the U.S., actually, and one was from India. So they're expecting guys like themselves in their 20s. Instead, they got a man from India, a father of four from Utah, and a 35-year-old woman from Boston. And better yet, they all went to the conference together and had a really good time.
That's fun.
Joe Bryan that weekend made, roughly $1,000. The guests had an affordable place to stay, and they made all these kind of connections. And so it was really meant just to be that one weekend. But upon reflecting about it, we said, certainly there are other times, events where, people need an affordable place to stay. And this was so powerful. Why don't we try to make it just as easy to book someone's home as a hotel? And so that's what we set out to do in early 2008.
And so I can tell you, like, when I started my company, there were the first couple of years where it was rough. I mean, there were times I'd sit there and go, like, you know what? I'm not sure if this is really gonna be a good idea, especially because I had ABC and CBS and all these other companies just turned me down, saying like the internet would be a fad. Okay, a show about technology would never ever work. And then there was that time, like maybe like 4 years into it, where the tides turned and we started to make money, and it was like, phew. Okay. What was that pivotal moment for you guys at Airbnb?
I feel like all entrepreneurs go through this journey. It's just a question of how long each part of the journey lasts. So for us, the first year was extremely difficult. No investors were willing to give us money. They would say, like, how can you trust a stranger, in your home? They didn't like the idea. And so we were basically, paying for this out of pocket with no income. And that made the whole first year very difficult. We were actually on the verge of quitting after that first year because
I've been there.
Sustainable. Yeah. So it was at this time that we went through a program called Y Combinator. It's a 13-week program where they give you a nominal amount of money. It's a lot more now, but back then it was only $20,000. Now they give you like a couple $100,000, I believe. And it's a 13-week program. They give you mentorship, and at the end, there's an opportunity to pitch investors in what's called a demo day. So this was powerful for a bunch of reasons. One, look, we had a deadline. There was a sense of urgency. We didn't want to waste this opportunity. So we really, we were already working hard, but we worked twice as hard during this period. And we were super focused on making the most of it and getting as much face time as we could with the folks who run the program, with Paul Graham, who's the founder of the program, getting their advice. And we got some very valuable advice during this period. One was that it's okay to do things that don't scale. We had been thinking that since we're building software, creating a website, you do that because, it increases your reach and it allows you to have a business at scale. But when you're first starting out, you really need to handhold every single customer. He told us that it's better to have 100 customers who really love you than 1 million customers that kind of just like you or are ambivalent. And so he really encouraged us to form these one-on-one relationships with each of our early customers. He said, go meet your users. And at this time, most of our users were in New York City. So we were in California. We flew to New York each weekend for 3 or 4 weeks. And we met every single one of our early hosts. And you might ask, how do you meet somebody over the internet? That's a little bit strange sometimes to reach out and request a meeting. Well, we noticed that a lot of our hosts had photographs of their properties that could be improved, especially back then in 2008. The cameras weren't very great. So we called them up and we offered, would you like somebody to professionally photograph your home for you free of charge? And, that was like, well, how can you turn down free? People thought, it might be nice to have some high quality photos of the home, whether it be for Airbnb or other purposes. So most people said yes to that offer. Well, then knock, knock, they'd get a knock on the door, and it was my co-founders, Joe and Brian, showing up themselves with the camera.
That is so
take
funny.
The professional photos. And look, they have the background to do this. They're designers by background. They know how to use a camera and a high-end camera. So they would come and take the pictures themselves, but also get to know the host and sit with them at the computer and show them how to use the website and get product feedback. They would also invite the host to come out for beers later on that weekend. And over beers, they would tell them the story of our entrepreneurship journey and really build a relationship with these early hosts, and such that they wanted us to succeed. And this was important because to succeed, we had to do a few things. One, we had to get the good photos, which we did ourselves by photographing them. But second, we talked to the hosts about really investing the effort into, putting more details into their profiles, writing a good description of their home, and also, being more thoughtful about the price. In the beginning, people were saying they want to charge $400 a night.
That's
but back then when it was air, bed, and breakfast, that was probably too much to start with. So we said, well, why don't you start with $75 a night? And if you get too much business, you can always increase your price. But if we had not met these users, they probably wouldn't be they wouldn't have be willing to accept our advice on matters of like setting price. But because they were rooting for us, they wanted us to succeed, they were willing to go out on a limb and do some of these things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And, that was key for making it work. Once we had, very visually attractive properties at a good price in New York City, that's a compelling product. And there started to be bookings every week. Hosts were starting to make money. They told their friends, and the whole word of mouth engine began running. So it was really over this 13-week period in early 2009 during Y Combinator that the puzzle pieces clicked for us, and we got this thing to become the rocket ship that it now is today.
Well, and that's really smart, because a lot of business owners, they think, I'm too big. I don't need to do this. I don't need to pay attention to whoever the customer is because I'm so focused on taking this business to the next level. And, what I do is I take a look at every email that gets sent to us through the website, through the support tickets, because, that's where we learn different things. Like, for example, just right before I came down to talk to you, is that there's a guy who said, you're missing a show on Tuned In. today? It's like, oh, okay, thanks for letting us know. Because if you have that personal relationship with that customer, is that they feel compelled, like they know you, and then they want to help you succeed in whatever venture that you're doing right now.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Mielke. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
Okay, so that was 2009. How were the 2010s? I mean, because that seems like when the companies really started to get that train on the track and really starting to make some momentum. And that's probably, I guess I would probably say 2016 is that when I became personally involved, and I had 3 properties listed in the luxury section at Airbnb. And I found the whole experience as a host to be quite lovely, very profitable. And the folks who I dealt with on a customer service level, I have no complaints, never had a complaint.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. A few things had to happen before we got to that point. Like I mentioned, it wasn't really until early 2009 that we established that what I call product market fit and started experiencing that growth in New York City. I'd say 2009, 2010, was really, focusing on New York and a few other cities across the U.S. It wasn't really until 2011, 2012, but really 2011 that we focused on international growth. And at that point, there were a number of competitors emerging, particularly from Europe. And so there was suddenly an urgency to really, grow the business, because travel is inherently global. And so if you want to have a compelling travel product, well, you better have homes and destinations all around the globe. And so it was very important to us to be an international company and be well represented in all the countries of the world. And so this was a kind of an existential threat. And it really mobilized us to start to open offices in about a dozen countries around the world over the span of 12 months.
Wow.
And hire local people who knew the dynamics on the ground and could meet our early hosts in those new markets face to face and build the confidence there. And ultimately we were very successful. You look today, we're in every country of the world, and Airbnb is synonymous with home sharing, and that's true of every country. So it's today 8 million homes in over 192 countries. So that was I would say an intense period, but obviously successful period. That international growth 2011 through 2012 to even 2013. After that, we were becoming a much bigger organization, right? And to do that, you have to scale your infrastructure, your customer support, your management layers, because as you start to have thousands of employees, you really need to make sure that your managers have the training. And so, look, honestly, there were a lot of growing pains as we figured out how to do this successfully at scale. I'm glad you had a positive experience in 2016 as you interacted with customer support and when you needed help. We're able to do that most of the time. But of course, you're building something involving a lot of people. Getting the collaboration right, it doesn't happen by itself. It really takes ongoing focus. And then the pandemic happened, 2020. Nobody saw that coming. We thought we were going to be going public in early 2020. That's what we were focused on doing. And suddenly, instead, our business came to a halt. We lost 80% of our revenue in the span of just 8 weeks.
Wow.
And obviously, IPO, we threw that out the window, and we focused on trying to save our business. And we had to make some painful adjustments. We had to part ways with roughly 20% of our workforce. One of the hardest things we ever had to do, completely just out of the blue and unexpected. This pandemic was, but the fact that there was no certainty about how this was going to play out and how long the recovery would take, especially in those early days, meant that we had to, make major changes. And as one of those changes was make sure that we focus on our core business. We had been actually expanding, always in growth mode, going in new directions. We no longer had the resources to go in so many different directions. And we said, you know what? Our core business is a great business. We need to double down on that. We need to get everyone once again working on perfecting the core business. All this other extra stuff, that can come later. That's not the priority. And so, we managed to have actually a pretty quick recovery during the pandemic. It turned out that after 3 or 4 months, people were still very eager to travel. They maybe didn't want to go to cities, but they wanted to go to rural areas. They valued having a home to themselves where they could kind of be in a bubble. And so these actually, were all trends that benefited Airbnb. And we were well positioned to adapt because we have so many different types of homes in so many different places. No matter what the consumer wanted, we could kind of meet the need. So it really illustrated the power of the model, and we were able to lean into that and actually eventually go public that same year at the end of 2020, which is kind of remarkable considering how dire the situation was at the start of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
But something that was a lasting kind of legacy of the pandemic for us was this idea that we need to continue to perfect the core, that we can't lose focus on just the basics of providing a great service. And so over the last 3 years, we've announced more than 535 updates to the core business. And we're announcing 50 more actually today for guests and another 20 for hosts today as well. Well, for hosts, the big announcement is what we call the co-host network. So we find that a lot of people have extra space. They are interested in making some extra income, but frankly, they just don't have the time to do this, or maybe they're not confident about getting started. They'd like somebody to help them with that. And so now, when you start, or even if you want to get some of your time back, you can work with what we call a co-host. This is someone who is already successful on the platform with their own property, and most of them are superhosts. 73% of them are superhosts. 85% of them have a property that's listed as a guest favorite. Both of these things mean that they received excellent feedback from guests. So they demonstrated that they can do an excellent job being a host. And these are folks who are willing to host your property for you. Now, they can do as much or as little as you would like them to do. So it could be a one-time thing. Just help me get set up, help me take some photos, help me, make some recommendations around linens or whatever. Or it can be an ongoing relationship where they're the point of contact for the guest. They take care of the cleaning. Whatever it is, you can find a co-host that provides that level of service and collaborate with them. We have 10,000 of these co-hosts on our network today.
It's awesome. Because I was a super host, by the way. I just wanted to throw that in there. Is that I was surprised at how little time that it took to actually have an Airbnb. I actually set it up. Had 3 properties, as I mentioned. I liked that an Airbnb representative actually came over and met me, and we toured the property together. Because it was in that luxury section. And I initially thought that I would do it and then I would turn it over to somebody here on staff to kind of maintain. But I wanted to learn how to do it. But it became like my hobby. I mean, I know that sounds kind of strange, but I sail and I scuba and I do all this other great stuff. But I really enjoyed the interaction with the guests. And like, for example, I had a chef from San Francisco who was on Maui and wanted to make lobster bisque. And I'm like, dude, you're in Maui, okay? But he needed a pot. And anyway, so, and then I had another guest who left me probably $600 worth of really nice wine. And so, so it becomes, so a lot of people think like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work, but it's not. But if you don't want to do it at all, that's a great idea to have somebody alongside you as a co-host.
Yeah. Well, look, I think being an entrepreneur or business owner, one of the best things about it is, providing value to someone, right? I think I certainly take a lot of pride in having a positive impact, on the customer. And so I think what you need to remember is travelers, their trips are really important to them, right? These are typically, things that they've looked forward to for a long period of time. They're really excited about it. And, you can play a big role in making them have just, a memory of a lifetime. So I think it's very rewarding to be a host and to have those interactions and the small things that you can do to make the stay, even that much more special. And then, sometimes you get to know the person and that spawns a relationship where you stay in touch afterwards, if that's how it works out. So yes, I don't think it has to take a long time to be a host. I think, it's very rewarding. At the same time, I think getting started can be intimidating. A lot of people are standing on the sidelines right now. And so, even if you just want to do this to help get set up, you can. I think the important thing with a co-host is that you can get as much or as little help as you want, and there's no minimum commitment. So you can start this way, and if you decide that you want to go it alone, that you're ready for that, no problem.
Nathan, I do have to ask you a question, only because it's in the news so much. I'm talking about the creepy cams that you might find in a rental. How is Airbnb addressing that?
Well, we absolutely don't allow cameras inside the rental, and any cameras on the exterior have to be disclosed.
Good.
And so those are the expectations that we set with our hosts. If any hosts violate that, they're subject to removal. Look, these situations are incredibly rare. Of course, when they do happen, they get a lot of attention.
For sure.
We take it very seriously. But look, we've hosted more than 2 billion guests. 2 billion guests. So, we've had billions of satisfied customers who've had great stays. And once in a while you hear one of these stories, but it's very, very, very rare. And it's because, we set that expectation with our hosts. Definitely no cameras inside.
And if somebody, because I hear that a lot. People are wondering, like, well, how do I make sure? You don't know if there's a camera in a hotel room either. I mean, quite frankly, it's something that because the cameras can be so small. I mean, and there are ways to check, but I think that it is something that's on people's minds. Because they are wondering about the cameras, and
I think the most important thing with Airbnb is there's an accountability mechanism. So hosts know that if they want to be successful, if they want to be able to continue to use the Airbnb platform, they have to live up to a high standard. And in fact, the most important thing is that guests are giving them good feedback. So after every stay, guests review hosts review guests, and if a host is not getting good feedback, we'll remove them from the platform. And in fact, over the last year, we've removed over 100,000 hosts who we felt were not good enough to deserve to stay on the platform and were not improving. So we took them off.
And that's good. You're being proactive.
Hosts know that if they want to, have the ability to stay on the platform, they have to be accountable to the guests.
And it is all the consumer reviews, and there's a lot of checks and balances when you go to look at an Airbnb, and if you want to talk to the host, you want to check out the host.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
I mean, you can go ahead and do that. But by far, the flexibility, the properties that you guys offer, and it's nice to be able to, especially like if you're traveling with kids, it's nice to be able to like be at a place where you can, make a lunch, and it's not going to cost you $50 at a hotel and, for room service. And then you also have the whole family atmosphere, where you can kind of stretch out, and you have the variety of properties, as you mentioned, like, whether you want to go to the beach, you want to go to the mountains, you want to go to Joshua Tree, you want to go to Maine, you want to go to Italy, whatever it may be. The reach and also the affordability, I think, is makes it an attractive consumer choice. And the fact that now that if you are offering people, if they have a property and they maybe just don't have the wherewithal or the time or the know-how or whatever to list that property, but they know that they could, is that I think that's an attractive proposition.
Yeah, well, we're constantly investing on both sides of that equation for hosts and for guests. I think you pointed out something very powerful, which is if you're traveling as a family or as a group, it's very expensive to get multiple hotel rooms. And it ends up not being the best experience because you are physically separated and you don't have your own common space to really gather around. And to have a home where you can sit at the kitchen table together as a family, have some space for the kids to play, that's really powerful. And as part of the updates that we're announcing this week for guests, one of the things that we're doing is doing an even better job of surfacing and personalizing to you, the search process and the process of finding the perfect listing. So for example, if you are a family and you say, we're 2 adults or 2 kids, as you're looking at properties, we'll surface interesting facts about the property that might be relevant to you as a family.
Nice.
For example, does it have a backyard? Did other families who stay here rate this property highly? We'll surface that kind of information because we know you're traveling as a family. So this release this week is all about personalizing the process of using Airbnb and making sure that based on the kind of group you are or the use case, we're showing you the relevant information. And you mentioned the fact we were just talking about transparency and how important that is. The reviews play a big role in that. But on top of that, we've labeled a subset of our properties as guest favorites. This is generally about the top 20% of our properties based on feedback and our analysis of customer service issues and things like that. We've designated properties to be guest favorites. So you can clearly see, which ones are really the kind of cream of the crop. We also make it clear if a property has lower ratings, we call that out too. We say, hey, this property is in the bottom 10%. So pay attention, read the reviews carefully. I think transparency is so important, and I think it's a big part of the value proposition on Airbnb is that we have all this information, we have all this guest feedback, and we're increasingly trying to call out to you, here are the things that would make this property a great fit for your group, your trip, and here are also the things that you should pay attention to that might make it not a good fit.
And that's all. It's fabulous. It really is. And as you were talking, I was thinking, not too long ago, I rented a home in Hollywood for a week for my family. And, I was dealing with the person on Airbnb to rent this property. Now, I have no idea who owns the house. Okay. I mean, I just needed a 4-bedroom house, and it needed to be above sunset, and I wanted a view. And so I picked this house, and so I'm, working out and near the garage, and somebody's like leaping, like looking over the fence. And I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "I'm here to drop off the script." And I said, "The script?" And he said, "Yeah. I don't want to give you the guy's name, but he said, is he home?" And I'm like, "No. But if you leave the script, I'm happy to just leave it, put it in the kitchen." And so the guy throws the script over the fence, and I look at it, and I don't want to say who owns this house, but it was an A-list celebrity that, you would see him in the Academy Awards ceremonies, just to let you know. And but I thought that was so interesting. And I went into the house. I'm like, okay, if you wonder who owns the house, here we are.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm a host too on the platform, and I don't make a big deal about it on my profile. So most people, have no idea. But we might be having a conversation and it comes up, or some people on occasion will recognize me. So it's a funny moment when they realize, who they're staying with. And look, there's a lot of successful people who have, extra homes or whatever. And Airbnb is a great platform to, utilize that space, monetize that underutilized space. So I think this happens quite a lot, actually.
Well, Nate, thanks for being here. Thanks for telling us all the good stuff that's happening at Airbnb. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
And congrats.
And for being a host.
Yes, thank you. Congrats on all the success, for sure. So, gosh, isn't that amazing? I mean, think about this. You have an idea, and then suddenly you are going public. Well, not suddenly. I mean, over so many years. But, you have the chance to go public. You've got, what did he say, 8 million customers in 200 different countries. I mean, it just goes to show you. I mean, if you've got something that you're sitting there and you're saying, you know what, I can do this. I really want to do this. I mean, I can't tell you how many people turned me down. They said oh, the Kim Komando show would never make it. I mean, people don't care about technology. The only people that would work or listen to a show or watch a show about tech, I mean, it's going to be somebody who's just a geek and a freak. And, here we are, 25 years later. I mean, obviously very successful. Let me knock on wood. No debt, no investors. And so if you have an idea, don't just pass it off. Put it into action. You can do this. And if I can ever help you do that, just reach out. You can do that over on the website at komando.com. And thanks for being here.
This program is a copyrighted production of Westar Multimedia Entertainment and protected by the copyright laws. Any rebroadcast or use of this program for commercial, business, economic, or financial purposes without the written permission of Westar Multimedia Entertainment is strictly prohibited.